This is Ocean Robbins, and I am here now with my dad and colleague, John Robbins, to welcome and introduce Senator Cory Booker. Senator Booker represents the state of New Jersey in the United States Senate. He's the former mayor of Newark, New Jersey. He's a Rhodes Scholar, and he is a dedicated advocate for healthier lunches and better nutritional education in schools, for community gardens and farmers markets, and for increasing access to healthy food in low-income communities. Senator Booker is the co-author of legislation that would lead to the elimination of factory farms in the United States. And we are here today to talk about this moment in history, about the state of our world, and about what might be a path forward. And now for this interview, I'm going to hand it over to my dad and colleague, John Robbins.
Well, thank you, Senator Booker, for being with us.
I am thrilled to be with you. You are really one of the more influential people in my life. When I was just in my early 20s, I read your book, and it forever changed me. I just can't tell you how much of an influence you've been on my thinking and really waking me up to a lot of things I just did not know, never questioned, never really thought about food systems. So you planted seeds that have reaped a tremendous harvest in my life of activism and my work in the Senate. So it's such an honor. Your son has become a dear friend as well. And I just love you both, and just am grateful for you. So when he asked me to be on with you, I'm like, heck yeah. So it's good to be here with you today.
Well, thank you. It's a privilege to be with you. And I love your work. I love what you stand for. I love how you express, the ways that you bring people together, the way you form connections with people. Right now, we're in a time when things are so polarized. The conversations seem to be splitting us apart in so many ways, and you're a voice again and again that brings us together and unites us and finds common ground that we can build on to face the issues and the problems we're really facing. And I want to start by asking you about the Farm System Reform Act that you have written, and now there's quite a few co-sponsors. What's the status of that? Why did you write it? What do you hope to accomplish with it?
In 2016-17, I went out to the Midwest and met with farmers, including Republican farmers, and just started learning from them and their own experiences about how broken our food systems are, and entangles all of us, from the end consumers in communities like mine to our producers, and just saw the tragic realities of farmers who saw their share of the consumer dollar drop precipitously, just about 50% in the last handful of years alone, where this massive corporate concentration is going on in our food systems that are driving so many farmers out of business, that are engaging in practices that are bad for our ecology, bad for animals, bad for our health and well-being, and are driving workers and farmers out of business on so many levels. Right there in our food system, this perpetuation of a lot of injustices. And so I wanted to write a bill in partnership with a lot of these farmers and some of their organizations, like the Farmers Union, that would really get to the bottom of addressing a lot of that. So the Farm System Restoration Act, it does a lot of things. It puts a moratorium on these concentrated animal feeding operations, or these CAFOs, which are so destructive to our environment, just grievous in what they're doing to rivers and streams and groundwater. I had a Republican farmer in the Midwest say to me that he used to be able to fish from his creek and drink from his well, the land that his family's been on since the 1800s. And since the CAFO moved in, they can't do either. It also allows, therefore, people to hold those big corporate integrators that have these vertically integrated monopolies, virtually, and to hold them accountable for the harm that their CAFOs are causing to communities and neighborhoods. And I'll take you down to Duplin County, North Carolina, the first time I watched one of these massive pig CAFOs and the huge lagoon of pig waste, and watching it sprayed on spray fields, and then watched the spray mist off into surrounding areas, met with the residents, and heard their horrific stories of respiratory problems, not being able to open their windows, run their air conditioning, put their clothing out on the line, property values going down. And these were low-income minority communities. and then to help those folks, because I realized that the contract farmers that are working really like sharecroppers for the big, massive multinational monopolistic corporations, they have horrible, horrible realities in their lives as well. And so we help them in this bill by putting about $100 billion into voluntary buyout programs for these contract farmers who want to transition away from this perversion of agriculture, away from these CAFOs, and get into some more sustainable practices that speak more to our heritage. And then I want to go right at this massive corporate consolidation that frankly is hurting our country in so many different sectors. But dear God, it's making such a painful impact on farming, and really prohibits the USDA from doing all these tricks that really make them a wholly owned subsidiary of these multinational corporations. And so this bill was helped to be written with a lot of farmers, hailed by a lot of farmer organizations. But what's beautiful about this, and I know you'll appreciate it, is that it is this incredible intersection of those of us who are really about animal welfare. So there you see those activists involved. You see farmers involved. You see ecologists involved. It's created this sweet spot where there's so many overlapping intersectional yearnings for justice in our country. And I really am excited. And the prospects, this is going to be a long process of awakening consciousness in our country. And that's why, again, I love who you are and what you do, is because we know from the civil rights movement to the workers' rights movement, suffrage movement, what always preceded legislation is this country becoming more aware of the injustices that are out there. And as their consciousness grew, it helped us to change things. Remember, the jungle with Upton Sinclair exposing a lot of the horrors that were going on in the meatpacking industry helped us to make reforms, even though we're slipping back to those days. And so I just know that our success is going to be based upon how well we can expand the consciousness of our country about the injustices going on in our food systems.
One of the things that's always bothered me about factory farms, CAFOs, is that they depend on concentrating animals in stocking densities that are really egregious. They're appalling from an animal welfare point of view, but they also, if you were designing a system, if you wanted diabolically for some reason to design a system that would breed resistant bacteria that are resistant to our antibiotics, I don't think you could find a more effective way of doing it. 80% of the antibiotics that are used in the United States for all purposes aren't used as medicines to treat bacterial infections in human beings, which is their rightful use, but they're used as feed additives in factory farms and CAFOs, just to keep the animals alive and gaining weight under the filthy and appalling conditions that have become normalized in these places. And so I think that your bill could help to save our antibiotics as medicines to help cure people from bacterial infections. And if we don't do something about this problem, we will lose our antibiotics. We will enter a post-microbial era, and then the next pandemic and the one after that are inevitable.
Well, look, I saw an opportunity amidst this COVID crisis to address global wet markets and the awful things that go on there. And I got Republicans to join me when they're talking about other countries. But I quickly make the point to people that, if you look right here at home, we are doing the same kind of practices that could cause global health disasters. And so you pointed out, it's not just us, but a lot of other countries are taking on these practices where they're prophylactically or preemptively using the majority of our antibiotics. And these superbugs will happen from these environments. It's not a matter of if. These superbugs will happen. And we will see Americans dying from very common colds or ailments that that are just because of the antibiotic resistance. So it is a massive public health crisis waiting to happen if people don't heed the warnings of health experts and sort of prescient people like yourself.
Well, if our listeners agree with you and with me that it's time now to end big ag's harmful factory farm once and for all. Is there a way that our listeners could add their names to become maybe citizen co-sponsors of your bill, to maybe encourage the Senate to take it up for a vote, or to encourage their senators to become co-sponsors of it?
What I will do eventually will be to petition. I do want to just let folks know that, there's an old saying in Washington, change doesn't come from Washington, it comes to Washington. And it really is the activism and engagement of people that bring about the change. And often it happens from tragedy, whether it's women throwing themselves out windows at the Shirtwaist Factory fire, or 4 girls dying in a bombing in Birmingham, or even the momentum we now have around a policing reform because of the horrible murder of George Floyd. But the thing that you and I both know is that there's silent horrors going on that literally these companies try to hide from public view, or pass things like ag-gag laws to prevent our knowledge. And we have to be activists to expose what most Americans in our common conscience would find unacceptable. So the challenge I give in response to your question is to don't be silent. Silence is complicity. Find ways to demand the change. Find out where your legislator, House member, or senators stand on this issue, because we really need your activism now more than ever. And your social media platforms, please educate people. There are books written about this. This is information, frankly, you've been talking about for decades. It's out there in articles. There are mainstream newspapers now that are starting to really speak to this crisis in our country. And so I just ask people to be activists. And remember, there is a economic justice aspect to this. There's a justice in terms of animal treatment in this. There's health and well-being of humans in this. There is a support for farmers as our original entrepreneurs in this. There are racial justice components in this. There are economic and climate change and climate justice issues in this. This is one of those points that if you said, hey, I don't have that many areas because I'm busy working my job, raising my kids. Well, this is one of those, Archimedes said, give me the right lever, I can change the world. This is one of those real leverage points to look at our food systems in America and to take steps to correct this injustice. And I feel really blessed to be one of the voices in Congress and amongst, finally, it was lonely calling this out. In fact, I'll tell you a funny story. I was with a well-known senator talking, and I'm on the Environmental Public Works Committee, and I just got to the Senate and was telling them that, when it comes to climate change, the animal agricultural sector produces about as much as damage as just the overall transportation sector. And I still remember they were like, shh, like it's like that's talk about an inconvenient truth. They didn't want that. And I found that sort of a shocking kind of response. And so I'm happy to see from that moment first in the Senate now more people willing to stand up and say this. But I tell you, there is a powerful lobby. And, I've from big oil to pharma, these are formal lobbies, but big ag, I am telling you right now, has such a hold. Think about this for a second, that the almost 90%, about 90% of our ag subsidies, the things that you and I as taxpayers pay in to go to 4 monocrops, a significant amount of that is to go feeding livestock, the billions of animals that we slaughter every year. And then the rest of it often goes to things that make us sicker, corn syrup. It's why that my kids here in Newark at the local bodega can buy a Twinkie product cheaper than an apple, because we have created food subsidies that further subsidize animal agriculture, as well as, unfortunately, the things that often give us diabetes and heart disease and more. We have such a savagely broken food system, but these powerful interests protect it. And it's not for the small independent family farmer. This is for these big multinational corporations who get billions of dollars because of our subsidies and fiercely protect these broken systems that make us sicker, that are often hurting animals, that are driving climate change with tearing down rainforest and more. So I'm laughing because this is my girlfriend Rosario, who just did a great film about soil erosion called "The Need to Grow," which further talked about these farming practices that are being done by these massive integrated multinational corporations that are just destroying our climate and our ecology. And the one thing that even her Rosario's film was talking about is that this idea of pitting farmers against activists like us. The reality is there's this common space. I believe we should be paying farmers, as my bill gives billions of dollars to get farmers out of these traps, but also paying farmers to do things like cover crops, crop diversity, and all the things that would make us healthier, but also help us to meet the climate future that we have. So I'm hopeful that we are on the beginnings of a larger movement and consciousness, and especially that's going to help to localize food systems even more, make them more resilient to moments like this where we have crises of pandemics. But I'm just asking all your listeners to double down on their activism in this space. We really use your social media platforms, use your voice, use your engagement to start waking people up. Because when you tell people the truth, I always say you get folk woke. They realize that this is wrong, and you get more people involved in this movement, and we will hit a tipping point.
It seems to me that you're bringing together animal rights activists who tend to believe, some of them anyway, that it's wrong or unethical to use animals for food, with farmers who make their living using animals, for breeding animals, raising animals for food. And you formed a coalition because both sides have an investment in a food system that actually works for people and the environment and for the animals. There's something about the way big ag has taken over meat production that has pushed small farmers into situations that are a living hell for them. There's no way out for them. I see your bill as potentially, anyway, being a path forward for them so that they can actually do what they wanted to do, which is grow food for people to eat in ways that are healthy for the environment and for the people who eat that food. And don't depend on egregious animal suffering. Don't depend on polluting the environment atrociously. Don't depend on going into debt all the time. And I really want to applaud you. That's a remarkable achievement.
Well, I don't know if you heard about this, but I ran for president last year. And I had these cynical folks saying to me, you're going to get killed in the Midwest when you're going through Iowa. What is some vegan guy? First of all, I would stand in front of Iowa farmers and get huge rounds of applause because I was connecting to them on issues that they are passionate about. They know, forgive my language, they're getting screwed by these massive multinational corporations. Their heritage, many of them have been on the land since the original land grants that were given generations ago. Immigrants that came from Europe that got a plot of land that's been in their families for so long, but now they're being muscled off of it because of these massive corporate consolidation. And so I'm glad you see that, and we have got to create these unexpected coalitions in our country that if we're going to get the kind of strength to get these things done. King said it, we're all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a common garment of destiny. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The injustice of faced by our farmers to people that live in inner cities, it's all interrelated, and we need each other. And the last thing I'll say, because you have this spirit where you can't lead the people if you don't love the people. And what my heroes from Ella Baker, Gandhi, King, these were people that even those that hated them, they still never stopped seeing their humanity. John Lewis, who's one of my great living heroes, told me the story as we were driving to see Jimmy Carter in Plains, Georgia, and it was a long car ride. But he was telling me about one of the people that beat him on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, how he was nonviolent, never stopped extending love to someone who hated him. And years later, he came to his office, I think with his child or grandchild, and asked for John Lewis's forgiveness. And we need to give pathways for redemption to each other, extend grace to each other. Often and I still remember a story. One of my friends who had a vegan restaurant told me once that he had some dish that had a little bit of cream in it, and had people break in and spray paint, like all this stuff. He goes, "There's a butcher shop down the road," and he got the wrath of people from within our own movement. And I just hope we can all understand that we're all evolving. There's an urgency in addressing these issues, but even people that we might perceive as on the quote unquote wrong side of this, we need, as you said, to find that common ground, to begin to find solid ground to start to build upon, and make progress upon. And I think that that's why the love we have for each other, the compassion to understand that this contract farmer who has this massive CAFO on their land, that they're trapped too in a broken system, and we need to imagine our way for everybody to have a pathway out to economic well-being, security for their families, and dignity.
Right now, we're in a racial moment where the ugliness of systemic racism is becoming more visible to everybody.
There is wretchedness and pain and hurt in this country. There are scars and wounds that have not been healed. There's unfinished business that we see from a wretched criminal justice system that makes us call ourselves the land of the free, but we're only 4% of the globe's population, but 1 out of every 4 incarcerated people. We see horrible disparities in educational opportunities, environmental injustice. The number one indicator of whether you live near a Superfund site or drink dirty water or breathe dirty air is going to be the color of your skin. But despite all of that, I still have hope because I know what the reservoirs of love and the possibilities that exist within the human heart and the human soul. If we can become aware, if we're willing to take time to open ourselves to others' struggles and expand that circle of empathy I talked about before, that ultimately should lead into action. And so I as a mayor of a majority Black city here, I was so distraught by the broken food systems that I created New Jersey's ever first food policy, a position in my city hall. And I started really learning more about how do we have, why is a McDonald's Happy Meal $1 or something like that? Because again, of what our society has done to subsidize illness and horrific treatment of animals, and all that goes into the billions of animals that are killed, it is directly connected to the disproportionate rates of disease in my communities. As a great guy named Ron Finley, please watch his TED Talk. He's called, you know him, the guerrilla gardener in South Central. He says in South Central we have drive-bys and drive-throughs, but the drive-throughs are killing more people than the drive-bys, because we have these systems that disproportionately are impacting communities like mine that had food deserts, but yet fast food restaurants where you could get a Happy Meal for $1 that would ultimately affect a child's performance in school, creates these stratospheric obesity rates in our communities that erode the potential of my children, of our children. So this compounding injustice of us having cities like mine that by design were pockets of poverty, where housing discrimination, where environmental toxins were loaded into our city. Our city has everything from the county incinerator put into Newark, all the highways cutting through the inner city. And so you're a child here, you grew up with environmental toxins, food deserts, a criminal justice system. Look, I went to Stanford and Yale and saw more marijuana being smoked there than in inner city communities. But you know what? If you're Black in America and white in America, no difference between using pot or selling it, but you're 4 times more likely to be arrested for those things in inner city communities. And for people who think that, hey, we're a nation that's legalized, stop. In 2017, there were more marijuana arrests in America than all the violent crime arrests combined. And so you just start compounding these injustices concentrated in areas where Black and brown people live: environmental injustice, criminal injustice, economic injustice, all these things. And then you add on to that the fact that you, as we saw with policing, where you have communities afraid. And so I just want everybody to be disturbed by that. I want us all to not be comfortable with a society where the color of your skin still determines the challenges, the the pain, the hurt, the threats. I don't want another generation of adults in this country teaching children, like my parents taught me, that you need to protect yourself. You need to be on guard because people are going to fear you. People are going to surveil you and search you, where you can get killed for a misunderstanding. And so this is why I just, again, I have a lot of love for you, my friend, because that you help us to understand the intersectionality of all of these issues, and that we're not that different, and that the plight of a farmer, white farmer in the Midwest, is directly tied to the plight of a child in an inner city community, and that by attacking these unjust systems, we could heal this country and help to heal the divisions and heal the rifts, and we all will elevate as a result.
Oh, that's beautiful, Cory, and thank you for that. You mentioned Ron Finley, and I know him and have interviewed him several times for our summits, as you've been also part of. He's a beautiful man, and he's very artistic. He's very creative, and he's growing gardens in the inner cities. And
yes.
I keep thinking about how during World War II, Americans planted home gardens. They were called victory gardens then. And these gardens produced 40% of all the fresh produce that was eaten in the country was produced in these home vegetable gardens, community gardens. And I keep thinking we could do something like that now. And if we had sufficient government support, it might be.
Yeah, I just want to say that you're 1,000% correct. When I was mayor of this city, we decided to do that. We turned city blocks into farms, creating all of this agriculture in our country, and to localize food systems, to invest, to use our big ag subsidies to support local communities doing this stuff. This is not a matter of us not having the resources. We have it. And I'm proud. I don't know if I told you this as a friend of mine. I'm so excited that Rosario's moving from Los Angeles in with me in Newark. And the first thing she said to me is, let's build a greenhouse. Let's create our own garden. You got to start living as thoroughly consistent, Cory. And when you said that, it so touched me, because that Buxton grandma of mine, that Des Moines grandmother of mine, bragged until the day she died. She was born the year before women got the right to vote in America in 1919. And she told me these proud stories about her victory gardens, about her rationing during World War II, and about how this country used to have this ethic. We're not seeing it right now. Now it's all like my freedom to be individual, to make my own. No, we viewed our freedoms differently in my grandmother's generation. We felt like we had a responsibility to each other. And that was how we created a freedom from fear, a freedom from want, a freedom from the Nazis, is when we found ways to work together. And my grandmother, a black woman, bragged about how she helped to beat the Nazis, and she was a part of a movement. And so this idea of thinking local, it's not just a slogan, it is really a way of being. And if we can start to reimagine our food systems and localizing them, we're going to empower farmers and restaurants and the flourishing of our health. So you thrill me when you talk about Ron's philosophy, but how it's urgently needed. And I hope the next time we have a conversation like this, Rosario will be sitting next to me and she'll be telling you about my experience growing food here at my house, my victory garden.
I look forward to that very much.
My victory garden.
Yeah, that's her trying to say right now that she wants to talk about our victory garden. Yes.
Okay.
My victory garden.
Yes.
Thank you, Rosario. Cory, I want to bring up one other topic. It's a painful one, but I know you don't shy away from pain. It's often a place where we can meet together. If we have empathy for one another, we can understand each other's pain. We can identify to some degree with it and do something about it, finally. Right now, there are 50 million Americans who are dependent on food banks. And for people who are in this situation, just getting enough calories to survive can be difficult. It can be arduous. It can be perilous. There's all kinds of challenges involved in that. And I'm of the belief, and I know you are too, that in a nation as wealthy as ours is, this is a crime against humanity. This should not be. Cory, what do you think we could do as a society to decrease food insecurity so that the poorest people, the poorest among us, would not have to fear starvation and malnutrition, so that we could have healthy, ethical, and sustainable food available and affordable to all.
So it is an American shame that we have so much food insecurity in the wealthiest nation in the world. And before I start talking about our food systems again, I just want to talk about the sin of people who, in my community, who work longer hours than my parents did, but still need to rely on food subsidies, food stamps, food kitchens, just to feed their families. And we have got to start talking about living wages in this country, about labor. The irony of my friend Natasha Laurel, God rest her soul, she's now passed away, but working in an IHOP where they barely pay her enough money, where she still needs housing subsidies. She still needed SNAP benefits. She works in a restaurant where they outsource the costs on society, from everything from the subsidizing of the beef that they're serving in their hamburgers, all the way to all of us subsidizing their labor costs because they're not paying their full-time workers, like Natasha, who caught extra shifts and still found it impossible to keep up. We have this awful reality in this country where work does not pay. We've used our tax code to shift wealth upwards. On so many levels. We carried interest. I can go through the things that shift by giving wealthier people more tax breaks. We shift wealth up, as opposed to doing the common sense things like expanding the earned income tax credit, expanding the child tax credit. Just would eviscerate poverty in America and lift the amount of people into food security that live in insecurity. And I haven't even started about the elderly in our country. 7 million seniors that live effectively below the poverty line because their Social Security checks don't go far enough. Because Social Security taxes are regressive taxes in the sense that somebody making $40,000 a year, $50,000 a year, $70,000 a year pays a lot more percentage of their income in Social Security taxes than someone making $4 million a year, $5 million a year, and $6 million a year. If you just moderately raise the Social Security tax contributions on the wealthiest Americans, you could take those 7 million seniors out of food insecurity, where I remember, like it was yesterday, talking to a Iowa senior who was telling me that they rationed their diet, their insulin, because they couldn't afford it, and are living in this kind of economic insecurity because of prescription drug costs that are out of control, or their safety net does not go far enough. So it's hard not to have a conversation about economic justice. And when we're talking about corporate consolidation in the ag industry, this corporate consolidation is hurting us in so many industries. The last example I'll give you that is in my dad's generation. By the way, remember, the minimum wage when it was put into place was above the poverty line. It is not above the poverty. It's never kept up with inflation. In my dad's generation, wages paid more than today. And New York Times Magazine did an article comparing a janitor that worked for Kodak, that old company, but then it was a tech company, versus a janitor that works for Apple. And they compared their life experiences. Well, the janitor that worked for Kodak actually worked for the company, and she got a tuition assistance program, so she went to school at night. She worked hard, American dream, worked hard, got the reward, got her degree, moved up in the company from a janitor to mid-level management, a great American story. Well, the janitor that worked for Apple doesn't work for Apple. They work for an outsourced company that wins that bid with Apple by suppressing wages and driving down the income. So now suddenly that person, they're doing the same work that this person did. But now instead of going to school at night to try to get out, they're actually working a double shift and a triple shift. And then we blame them when they're not home to check homework for their kids, or can't do a lot of those things that often we think that Americans should do, but don't realize that so many Americans are working themselves to death in substandard housing because they can't afford their housing costs, relying on food banks because they can't afford food, needing public benefits, and the story goes on and on and on. I do not understand why we would do this to ourselves when we know children perform better in school when SNAP benefits are increased. We know that families who are teetering on poverty can be brought out of poverty just by having food security added to their lives. So there are a lot of systemic things we need to do on the food side. to provide better access to bountiful food in our country through what we do with our subsidies, what we do with SNAP. But this economic injustice in our country, where I watch people who work longer hours than my parents did, but they still find themselves falling behind. This is something we have to address as well.
We sure do. And I'm afraid it's going to get worse before it gets better because of the COVID-19 issue, what it's doing to the economy. And I see dominoes about to fall on a lot of people in a heartbreaking way. Already there's 14 million American children whose parents are having a hard time feeding them. And the percentage in the Black and brown communities is even higher than it is in the white communities, as often is the case in this country. It sometimes is, a lot of us can feel, I can feel certainly overwhelmed. I can feel almost resigned. It's like so much, the difficulties, the problems they can seem insurmountable. The forces behind them can seem so massive. There's so much momentum behind them. There's so much vested interests that it can seem intractable. And yet when I listen to you and when I talk with you, I feel that resignation lifting. I can feel something hopeful starting to arise in me. And I love you for that because it gives me a sense of aliveness and connection to the problems that's fruitful, that I can be effective. There's things we can do. We don't have to accept it the way we've normalized it to be.
Yeah, look, I learned from people in the city and the community around you who helped raise me into an adult and the person I am today, who have, as I said earlier, their hope is scarred and calloused. Their hope has been bloodied and battered, but yet they still hope anyway. For them, hope is this indomitable, invincible determination to never let despair have the last word. And that to me is what real hope is all about. And we are not powerless. We can't surrender our power. The story I told a lot during the campaign was just the fact that there was one white guy on a couch in 1965 watching TV. I know the movie he was watching was called Judgment in Nuremberg. It was March 7th, 1965. He's on a couch in New Jersey and watches John Lewis and marches on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And his first instinct is to go to Alabama and he was a young lawyer and try to help out, but he realized couldn't afford a plane ticket, couldn't shut his business down, was barely making ends meet, had a family to support. And the problem with racism in America was so big, but he didn't allow his inability to do everything to undermine his determination to do something. And so he did a little calculation in his head and realized he could afford 1 hour pro bono work. And he goes to working. Now, I called him up to interview him because he said he helped meet with this incredible group of activists and form a sting operation to help Black families who were getting turned away from housing in white neighborhoods in New Jersey. And he said he got this case file of this family that needed some help. He said they went and fought to help the family. There was literally a physical altercation when the real estate agent refused to give the contract, sicked a dog on the father and punched the lawyer and all this violence. But they ended up moving into that town. And he says to me, Cory, you know the name on that case file, right? And the name on the case file of that family he helped was Carrie and Carolyn Booker, my parents. And so here's one man on a couch years before I was born making a decision to give 1 hour a week of pro bono work that, as you said, clicked over all these dominoes. And here I am sitting before you as a United States Senator. So we are all more powerful than we realize. And, Reinhold Niebuhr wrote a lot about this. You may sometimes not even live to understand or see the ramifications of your decisions, but do not surrender your power. Do not yield or be seduced to despair. Do something right now. Do something tomorrow in the cause for our country. You may not know it, that one day a 22-year-old sitting in Oxford is going to pick up the book you wrote, and it's going to change his life and turn him away from eating meat and send him on a lifelong odyssey to join you in your cause that you've been talking about for decades. You just never know what helping one family plant a garden it might do, or there's so many things that we can do. So you're not impotent. And I pray that we can work together. And I tell you this, all of us are our ancestors' wildest dreams, living lives beyond their even imagination. I still remember my grandparents' reaction when I graduated from Yale Law School how dangerous it is. I still remember that grandmother from Buxton taking her to Barack Obama's inauguration, and the reporter asked her, "Did you ever think you'd live to see this?" And she said, "Nope." So I just want you to know, I believe if we are loyal to the work of racial reconciliation, of economic justice, of food systems, justice in our food systems, if we're loyal to the work, the hard yeoman's work, then one day our grandchild will one day say, we'll be able to say before them that we never imagined we'd live to see what they're seeing.
You know, I recognize everyone's going to have authorship over their own food choices and should have that sovereignty. And people will make choices that make sense to them. They want to enjoy their food and should. But we can feed people healthy food and environmentally sustainably grown food. We don't have to pollute. We don't have to destroy the topsoil. We don't have to use pesticides and herbicides and insecticides and fungicides everywhere. We really could grow food organically, grow it in a way that respects the earth and respects the people who are involved in it, respects the animals that are involved if they are. And I wonder about your food choices. I know you are a vegan, you've said that. I know you also do respect people's right to choose and need to make their own food choices. Why do you make the food choices you make? What is it in it for you? What is the statement you're making to yourself in your own heart, to the world, when you eat and choose the food that you do?
So, I mean, what is the most intimate thing we can do is what we put in our body, right? And I realized that so much of the impact I have on the world is not by what I say, but what I do. And that thing I do multiple times a day, sometimes too many times a day, of choosing what I do. It's like I'm voting every moment. I'm supporting systems every moment. I'm whatever injustices that are there, I'm complicit in those. And so I really mean this, that your book sent me on this odyssey. I was stunned when I read through those things. And I realized once you know, you can't go back to not knowing. And I realized that if I was going to be my own choices of integrity, if I was going to live a life in alignment with my own integrity, then I had to stay true to myself, because to thine own self be true. It's the most important thing. And I have to say, I became a vegetarian, knew I should become a vegan after I read your book, but it took me years and years and years. And I remember learning a lot about the egg industry and knowing about for me again, the baby chicks being born, the male chicks being put into like a garbage disposal. And one day I was at a hotel, have those big trays of eggs. And I was just going through the line, I was sitting down in front of my eggs, and then I knew it. They call it neuroassociative conditioning. My brain had shifted. I couldn't eat that anymore without associating with things that were so, for me, so not in accord with my values. And so you're right, I have no judgment, nothing but love. If people had judged me when I was 15, 18, or judged me when I was 35 and still eating Ben and Jerry's and ordering pizzas, I just think we should just take care of our own, and also have the humility to know, I don't know where this suit was made. Fast fashion is something that's awful. And this was my year to begin to examine that. And begin to learn more about those systems, because we all are living in society where, just because we live in a larger society, we participate in systems whether we know it or not. And so I just want to live my life where I'm growing in understanding and allowing that to inform my actions. And one of the most sort of affirming things I've done in my life journey has been by changing my food choices. You've got to lead with love, and it starts with loving yourself. But it's been a journey for me, man, and I'm not even nearly done in terms of just trying to get to a point where I'm living my life with the kind of integrity within my personal decisions, and that's going to make a bigger influence than any. You and I both know of people that preach it's like the newly converted sometimes. I just don't think that that's the way we make a difference. The way we make a difference is by living our light and letting it shine. And like a lighthouse, you're going to affect and guide and help others. But God, I'm a work in progress, and I pray for the strength that I can be the change that I want to see in the world. That simple ideal from Gandhi.
It's a very simple idea and a very beautiful and powerful one, I think, and you're living it. A lot of us are as best we can. My own sense of it is that if you were to say, what's the odds that in 20 years, half the people in the United States would be vegan? I would say probably close to zero. That's just not going to happen. But if you asked, what are the odds that by that time, half the meals eaten in the country would be plant-based? I think that's doable. So I don't see that the goal is to convert people to be vegans. I see that the goal is to help people live healthier lives, make healthier food choices that are healthier for their bodies, for their immune systems, for their respiratory systems, for their ability to withstand viruses and other types of illness, and also to reduce their risk of chronic diseases, heart disease, diabetes, and obesity, all these other things that plague us today. And at the same time, make food choices that are more compassionate to the animals, more sustainable to the environment, can help to fight climate change. All of these things can be done with our forks, with our spoons. We don't have to become militant. We do not have to become abrasive. We can just care for ourselves and each other in ways that you model. And you are so eloquent in speaking for that possibility that all of us have, that opportunity that all of us have every time we make any choice. When we start to own our thoughts and the power of them, own our choices, our food choices, and the other ways that we interact with life and engage with life, and try to bring all of those choices into a deeper sense of congruence with our hearts and our spirits and our real purpose for being alive, then we join each other. Then we're together in this, facing racism, facing a pandemic, facing all the ugliness and problems that haven't been addressed and need to be addressed in our society, facing the wealth inequality problems, facing what's happening with our hearts open to one another so that we can work together to solve these things. And I just love you, Cory, for being such a beautiful spokesperson and embodiment of this opportunity that I think we all have.
Well, you just called me eloquent while you just literally, I'm going to play this back because the way you put things there are so kind and gentle and beautiful and also practical and pragmatic. I love what you just said about we're not going to, half the world is not going to become vegan or half our nation, but to reduce, that's a much bigger thing. I mean, I tell people this all the time as, 10% more people being vegan in America is not as powerful as 50% people making significant reductions in the meat that they consume. But the gentility you have towards others and the love and compassion you have towards others, wherever we are in our journey, that's what we always need to affirm. And that unconditional love of my friends who can't imagine a 4th of July without a steak. God bless you, love you. And let's both keep telling our truths and be open to each other's journey. And I'm not going to be, mean or militant or any of that stuff. Again, you are a person of great eloquence. And as I said, one of my great life heroes for how you've lived and how you've taught me from afar. When I finally got a chance to meet you, it's like, what's that old warning? Don't meet your heroes. Well, I met one of my heroes and he exceeded my adoration that I already had for him. So just thank you. I pray that God gives me the chance to do a lot more work with you on this journey because I just would love to find ways to help elevate the message that you've been consistent on for decades now. I just think that you are a great healer in this country and a great light worker, and I'm just grateful for you.
Well, thank you, Cory, and thank you for being with us. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, that you've done for a long time, and that you'll continue to do. Your star is ascending. Your prominence will grow, and that's a wonderful thing. It's a blessing to all of us. So I want to thank you for being with us today. Thank you for your work. Thank you for being who you are, in my heart, in our world.
Thank you. Appreciate you, brother.